Training camp is on. Players hit the field -2.
Tom Thibodeau has extended for another 3 seasons.
Manager Alex Cora is officially now here to stay.
The Yankees got swept by the Mets for the season.
They extend Andrew Nemhard. I'm stunned.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents The Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
But he left early after struggling.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast.
We're getting closer and closer to regular season football. September 5th, they open up against the Chiefs. Now, Q, I know the big story of yesterday's practice was Lamar ended up returning. It was his first day of training camp. He's back out on the field, but he didn't stay for the whole time. He ended up leaving early with some members of the athletic training staff. And so, Jonas Schaefer, I know you were out there too, and I want to get your opinions on it, but officially 1 for 5, if I'm not mistaken, there in action where he had a check down to Rasheen Ali, overthrew Tez Walker down the sideline, which was closely guarded, overthrew Rashad Bateman on a crosser, which was picked off by Marlon Humphrey, missed Justice Hill on a screen, and then check down to Justice Hill was dropped. So to you, did Lamar, did he look fluid out there? Was he still kind of laboring? Did he look 100%? Was he struggling? What was kind of your overall sense of Lamar and what you got to see of him?
I think the totality of when he was out there for a backup quarterback, for a starter that doesn't wear the jersey 8 for the Ravens, he looked good. For 2-time MVP, for the stud, amazing, ultra-talented quarterback that he is, he looked rusty. He looked like he was sick. He looked like he missed some days. Looked like he, needs to get back into his groove. He was present as far as talking to his guys, doing little things as far as when routes on air and all that. But, there is some sickness, some like lethargy going on. I think that he will eventually work out of. But for 40 days of camp, the start of it isn't going as planned.
Right. The sickness obviously throws a wrench in some things here. And again, we've heard from, John Harbaugh, Todd Monken, that Lamar, when he is, in the meetings, he's present, he's active, and that's great. But it is another thing to step out on that field. And so I know when you talk about you're out for a couple of days, then you're pretty much thrown into the fire here in this brutal Baltimore weather that we have right now in late July. It can be a little tough. Now, this is not something I'm panicking about. This is not something I am worried about for him. I think for me, this is natural, where if he's clearly not 100% still, he's trying to work his way through, get back on the field with his guys, get some reps in. And with that, if you're thrown into the fire there, yeah, sure. I mean, it's going to look a little rusty at first. There are going to be some down moments. So me personally, Q, I'm not necessarily super stressed about this, but are you?
I'm not necessarily super stressed about it. Typically, a defense, when it comes in to camp, they are up to speed a little bit faster than the offense. The offense kind of has to feel its way. I've been in so many training camps. I have witnessed so many training camps, and without fail, that is just the model. Maybe you might have a training camp where you just have so many veteran guys, and eventually they're going to, just take over like a Buffalo Bills when they went to 4 consecutive, Super Bowls. Yeah. Jim Kelly, they were humming along, but that's like, a unicorn. That's a rarity. So ultimately, I just think it's one of those situations where, yes, they're going to get caught up to speed. Yes, Lamar Jackson is going to do what he does. And yes, everything is going to work out ultimately.
Yes, and so there was no John Harbaugh at the podium today, and so we didn't get an update from him. Todd Monken said, it's just another step for Lamar to get back on the field and have everything there, but said he doesn't really feel behind, right? It doesn't feel to him like Lamar's behind with his illness. Todd Monken ended up saying that Lamar was a big part of the offseason, like we've talked about. He was in the meetings today. He was great in the early part of practice. So as training camp continues to go on, I do expect Lamar to get back into shape. I mean, he's too good not to, in my opinion here, Q. But when it comes to a sickness, and you obviously specializing in sports performance, body performance, when you're thrown back into a fire, and again, we don't know what Lamar had. That wasn't disclosed to us what he had. But when you were you're down and you're all of a sudden thrown back into this weather, isn't it natural to have something like this happen where you might not feel great? You might feel like you're great maybe in the first part of practice, then it really starts to catch up to you and you just need time to work your way back.
Yeah, so the immune system is a fickle thing. When you have everything working well and you're not fighting off anything, bro, you're Superman. When you do have, and we've seen Lamar, so it's not like this is something like brand new, but we've seen Lamar where he's gotten ill and had to be, sent home or whatever. The immune system does what it does, and you got to let, every person is different. You got to let it, kind of take its course. I think for Lamar, it's a situation where, I'm just not feeling it, but my guys need me. Let me go ahead and put on the cape and go out there. Woo boy, man, I'm dizziness, lightheadedness, maybe some intestinal challenges, all that can kind of go on. And it's smart to, shut it down so it doesn't get worse. That's the really big thing. Once you get into that sickness mode and you're starting to heal, it can turn the other way if you, in fact, all of a sudden think that you can push it and don't get the proper rest to allow it to fully just kind of get out of your body, whatever you're fighting off.
Right. And so, again, this was, if anything, precautionary, but just playing it safe. You don't want to push yourself when you're going through that, especially on your first day back. So hopefully he'll be out there today at practice on Thursday, but we will see what ends up happening. Now, Q, in terms of what he actually looked like on the field.
They actually have, just as a point of record, they have today, Thursday
Was
off.
it the day off? Okay.
So then Friday, mark our calendars, Friday and Saturday, first 2 days in pads. Let's get it on. Like it's, you kind of got to get ramped up. Well, first 2 days in pads. Offensive line, I'm sure they are getting salty with everybody. Woo, Adafe is doing this, and, that guy is doing that, and, this rush specialist, and, boy, that DN, and this, man, now all of a sudden pads come on. Let's see what it looks like.
Yeah, I had my days mixed up. I thought it was the Friday was off, the Thursday they had. So thank you for the correction. So hopefully Lamar's back out there on Friday, and that will mark again another exciting milestone on that checklist with pads coming on there. But in terms of what he did look like on the field, Q, in terms of his throws, kind of going back to what we were talking about a little earlier in the segment, what did you see there? Was he putting zip on the throws? Was it something where he was overthrowing, underthrowing guys? I mean, you said that he didn't look like the prime MVP Lamar Jackson, but what did you see out of his throws?
Yeah, so like one throw in particular, I think that kind of sums it up. I know Jonas was saying that it was tight coverage on Bateman, but like NFL-wise, in my mind, Bate was wide open, and you're going to get that what is perceived as tight coverage. It was a deep over route. That deep over route was patient. It was like coming open. And like usually Lamar has the capability of, fitting it in there, but it just sailed on him. And that's just so unusual for him. And so when Bate went up, you could just see where he's like, man, I climbed the ladder as high as I can climb. And yes, Marlon got a free one. It was a good one. Great job. Kudos to you. But I think that kind of summed up the day. The throw where, you would say, what was the running back? Was it Justice Hill that had dropped the ball? Yeah, it was kind of behind him. That's kind of like an A to B, just lead me out in the front and let me keep on going type of a throw. So it just was like a tick off of what we're normally seeing with, two-time league MVP.
Yeah, and again, this is with him dealing with the illness, with him getting back. So again, you hope by the time we're in, mid-August here and we're in the preseason in those practices, this is not happening, which I don't expect it to, but I'm not hitting the panic button here. Hopefully Lamar feels better and he's able to be back out there soon. We'll come to the second part of the show. We'll talk about the secondary continuing to dominate as they've had one heck of a start to training camp so far. Stay tuned. We'll talk about it next on the show. We're back our second segment, Locked On Ravens with Kadri Ismail. I am Kevin Ostreicher talking Ravens training camp notes. And Q, you having your boots on the ground out there in Owings Mills. I know you've seen a lot of interceptions over these last couple of days in this secondary. And, it's not just one player. I mean, we can pinpoint certain guys and we'll do that, but you got Arthur Millette, you got Nate Wiggins, Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens, Jalen Armour-Davis, Eddie Jack. The list goes on and on and on and on. How impressed have you been with the secondary, and how have they looked to you so far?
Yeah, I tell you what, you look at this group, and I know I even mentioned it earlier when it was in the OTA sessions, where I was like, the deepest group and arguably the best group top to bottom is the secondary, and that includes the quarterback position. I have not been wrong, and they are showing up. Poor TJ Tampa, with the sports hernia, because I'm sure if he was out there, he'd be like, yeah, I'm right here in the mix as well. So when I look at it, you're just seeing guys, like you said, with Nate Wiggins, who kind of, was looking really good. Arthur Millette climbing the ladder the other day and just snagging the ball out of the air. It wasn't all Lamar throwing interceptions. It was every quarterback throwing picks. And it was smart, strong coverage. Some plays, there was some holding going on, and for whatever the reason, the refs weren't calling it. Which to me, as a receiver, I get pissed about it. But then there were some other ones where it was just damn good coverage, like the Nate Wiggins one in the rain. Homeboy really saw it, read his keys, and his shoulders were square to the pick, and you just saw the way he was able to aggressively go up, high point the ball and take it back. Again, Marlon Humphreys. Marlon is just being around the football. So I think it's, the quarterbacks trying to figure it out. Matter of fact, I think it was Tramel Walther, literally, he bats a ball up in the air and he picks off Devin Leary. And, he's rumbling, bumbling, stumbling down the, sideline as well. So, it's across the board. Zio's defense, he's loving it. He's loving how they're all flying around. Eddie Jackson flying around, getting assimilated into the defense. They're all having their opportunities to get their hands on the football, and rightly so. But I think the offense is going to, find its rhythm and find its space and place. And they're going to be making their plays too.
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, the Olympics, WNBA should be back soon. There's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. The Jacksonville Jaguars, despite their offseason moves, are right on the playoff bubble. FanDuel has the Jags plus 118 to make the playoffs, as well as the second best odds to win the AFC South at plus 270. The Houston Texans are division favorites, plus 105. If you're a Texans fan, like our editor, Lance Daw, you may look at Houston's over-under. Their win total set at 9.5. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the moves that make the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Training camp is on. Players hit the field -2.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Looks like Brock Purdy's in fantastic shape, looking ripped, gains 2 pounds, ball coming out well in his first full offseason, healthy as the starter. But one guy, the one protecting his blind side, Croc, Trent Williams, is not at camp. He is actually holding out now. We knew he might want a new contract. We heard about that when Christian McCaffrey did his deal. And apparently he's going to put the pressure on the 49ers now. And Trent Williams, a surprise holdout from 49ers camp with, and we haven't talked about this because you weren't here yesterday, Brandon Ayuk holding in. He's there. He was walking down the sideline in shorts and a t-shirt, but not practicing. So we got a holdout and a hold in, Croc, at 49ers camp.
How much money do you have to just not care that you're going to get fined $40,000 a day? Like that's a whole car. Like that's a whole
Probably
vehicle.
paid 20-something million a year at that point, I would say.
Like, yeah, I don't need that $40,000. I want to know one thing: are the fans going to call Trent Williams a diva, or are they not going to call him a diva because they haven't heard from him? They just know he's holding out.
Yeah, it's hard for offensive linemen to be divas, but look, if Brock Purdy starts getting hit, fans are going to start muttering something to themselves. And Trent Williams backup, and now we know a little bit more about the depth chart because with Trent Williams out, it was Jalen Moore, who's going into his 4th year, I think now, right? As with the 49ers, he's the backup left tackle, so he was getting reps instead of Trent Williams. Got beat a couple times. Yetur Gross-Matos and Nick Bosa got him, according to camp reports. I was not there to verify, but that could be.
We will be there Tuesday. We will be there next Tuesday.
We will be there Tuesday. Say hi. Come say hi to Croc. Wink is going to be there as well.
No, but the celebrity out of everybody's going to be there. Leo.
Oh, Leo is going to be with me too. Yeah. He's. I told him about it, and the first thing he said is, "Do I get to play football?" So
I like that response.
I said, you know what? You might be able to play catch with sourdough Sam.
Yeah.
So Trent Williams, he's not there. It's I mean,
I was a little surprised. I was a little surprised, Peacock. Like I know we kind of joked about it, kind of lightheartedly kind of joked about it when the whole McCaffrey thing was like, oh, he gets paid and Ike's trying to get paid. And it's like, well, what if Trent Williams doesn't show up? Is he gonna, and then he doesn't show up, and I'm like, dang, did we kind of speak that into existence? But I understand it from this perspective. This is dang near it for him. He has 1 or 2 more years left. I mean, what is he, 37, turning 38? I mean, he's up there.
Yep.
Dude, that's my age. Now he takes a lot better care of himself than I do, but to be performing at the level he is, like there isn't a fall off. I keep wondering, like, when is the fall off going to happen? Obviously, he gets banged up here and there. We know he's going to miss a game or so each year, but to play at that level at this age, but also in the back of your head to know, I'm probably not going to play too much longer. So I need to go and get every dollar I can, every million. And I mean, he doesn't care about $40,000 a day, but I'm pretty sure he cares about an extra, I don't know, $20 million, added to that contract.
Apologies to Trent Williams. We added an extra year to. He actually just turned 36 on July 19th.
Okay.
So
I guess that's not too.
Yeah, he's still got some years to go before he turns 40. Guys can play into the late 30s on the offensive line. So he's not quite an old man yet as far as NFL offensive tackles go. We've seen the best players able to hang around for quite a long time, and Trent Williams is one of, if not the best player at that position. How much more does he want? I wouldn't think that it would take long for Trent Williams and the 49ers to figure something out. That's what's weird to me. Does he want something that's kind of out of range for the 49ers in a same situation that Brandon Ayuk couldn't get a deal done? Or does he just have to remind him, hey, I'm here too. Don't forget about me. I want my deal.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of Marshawn Lynch. Remember, I was going to say a couple years ago, but I think it was towards the end of his time with Seattle. He was kind of holding out, and they added like an extra $1.5 million to his contract. And he's like, all right, I guess I'll show up now. Like he just popped up. So is it that simple where, you give him an extra couple $1 million and he's like, okay, like give me that this year, guarantee next year. I'll be here the next 2 years and then I'm out.
I'm looking up Trent Williams' contract right now because he was already one of the highest paid tackles in the NFL. Let's see.
At the time he signed, he made, if I'm not mistaken, $100,000 more than Bakhtiari from the Packers. Like, okay. and people were like, "Oh, that's really petty," because it was just like $100,000 more, so he could say that he's the highest paid tackle in the league.
And so now he's in year 4 of that contract. That was 2021. His base salary is $20 million this year, and that's a lot of money still for an offensive tackle. $22 million next year. His 2026 base salary is $32 million, and got a void year in 2027. So he signed for 2 more years after this year. Currently, those aren't poor dollar amounts.
What's guaranteed though?
Well, he used to have guarantees. Now there's fewer guarantees left because the signing bonus stuff's, he's hit the portion of his contract where you could cut him and get cap relief. Let's put it that way.
So I'd be willing to bet that $32 million, he wants some of that added to the next 2 years because he knows he's not playing 3 more years.
Tom Thibodeau has extended for another 3 seasons.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast.
Adrian Wojnarowski reports New York Knicks coach Tom Thibodeau has agreed on a 3-year contract extension that will take him through the 2027 to 28 season, sources told ESPN on Wednesday. So no report on the numbers. The Knicks don't usually report coach numbers. That might come out at some point, but probably unlikely. But I can assume, based off some of the coaching deals being handed out, that he's making in excess of $10 million a season, and maybe even more than that. So, but honestly, I don't really care about what the number is for Tibbs, because that is all just James Dolan's money. And so whatever Leon Rose wants to pay him, I think he's earned it at this point, which let's get into the resume so far and where we're at with Tibbs and, what he's accomplished so far as a Knicks head coach. So first off, by partway through this season, I believe, he will officially be the longest tenured Knicks head coach since Red Holzman, which is a huge accomplishment in and of itself. So that's thing one. I mean, just crazy that it's taken that long, since the golden era of the Knicks for a coach to be given this long of a leash to figure things out. And honestly, good on Leon Rose that he did give Tibbs this amount of time to figure things out. I'll always be the first one to own my own, stupid takes or takes that aged poorly, one of which was at the end of the 21 to 22 season. I know Gavin and I were both on the, hey, it was great for one season, but I think Tibbs has lost this locker room. I think this is about finito at this point. Let's get rid of this guy. Let's try to find the coach to move this team to a new level. And luckily the Knicks did not heed our advice in that case, and ultimately kept Tibbs, and he's had 2 really great seasons ever since. So overall, so far as Knicks head coach, Tibbs is 175 and 143 as Knicks head coach. He has made 3 playoff appearances in 4 seasons. He reached the second round each of the last 2 years, and one could argue that he realistically could or should have made an Eastern Conference Finals appearance this season, if not for the huge injury toll. Obviously, we saw in that last game, they got kind of blitzed early on by Indy when they were, quote, healthy as they were going to be, I guess, with OG Anunoby coming out and trying to do a Willis Reed impression with Josh Hart's, abdomen falling apart. And then, of course, Jalen Brunson breaks his hand. That was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back there. But I think even more impressive than just the straight record and what Tibbs has, done as far as turning the ship around, just getting the Knicks to the playoffs 3 times in 4 years and all that. He's overseen a lot of good player development. So, and, maybe we'll see this year. I know Johnny Bryant was sort of given a lot of kudos for what was happening with the guards, because it seemed like he was always working really close hand in hand with, the guards on the team, whether that was Emmanuel Quickley or Quentin Grimes when he was playing well, or RJ Barrett. It was a lot was given to Johnny Bryant as far as development goes. But no matter what, all this has happened under Tibbs's tutelage. He's turned Mitchell Robinson into one of the best rebounding bigs in the entire NBA and one of the best defensive bigs in the entire NBA, which I don't think can go unnoticed. He's overseen Julius Randle turning into a 2-time All-NBA player. I mean, he came in when Julius was, after his first season with the Knicks, not the most popular guy in town. A lot of people were not super in on the whole Julius Randle experience after one season when he was playing with rookie RJ Barrett and all that. And Tibbs came in and, regardless of, I think Julius Randle obviously deserves a ton of credit for the amount of work that he put in and, the amount that he changed his game around that 20 to 21 season. But Tibbs also put him in a position to, maximize that. and turn him into a superstar by essentially making him the entire hub of the offense that year, when the Knicks were definitely lower on talent overall than they are at this particular moment by far, and really needed a guy that could be the hub. Tibbs figured it out with Julius and turned him into now a multi-time All-NBA player, or at least empowered him to become one. He oversaw Isaiah Hartenstein turning into a high-dollar center target and a bona fide starter. Maybe to the chagrin of the Knicks, Tibbs almost did too good of a job with Isaiah Hartenstein. So, I guess you could bemoan that one a little bit. He did too good. He does too good of a job with bigs and gets them big contracts elsewhere sometimes. But he did do that with Isaiah Hartenstein. This one will probably be polarizing, but he oversaw Emmanuel Quickley turning into a solid to possibly great starting NBA point guard now with Toronto. Obviously was not starting with the Knicks, but I think for all the moaning that myself and Gavin and many Knicks fans did about Tibbs' treatment of Quickley and all that, I think ultimately you could say, Quickley did turn into a better player in his time with the Knicks. So whether that was on Tibbs or not, he ultimately did give him more of a role as time went on, to the point where the year prior to being traded from the Knicks, like myself and many people, thought that he should have been the rightful sixth man of the year. And so it's not like he gave him no playing time. He did give him enough to make a really solid sixth man of the year a sixth man of the year campaign. Then he maximized Dante DiVincenzo so much last year that he became a top 3 shooter in the NBA, just straight up by the numbers. Like, again, I know that Tibbs wasn't taking the shots for Dante, but ultimately recognized fairly early on in the season that he was the better option to Quentin Grimes, sat Grimes down, and then, helped set up an offense where Dante was taking tons of threes every game, like 7-8 attempts per game, and making, almost 40% of them, becoming one of the best shooters in the NBA in the process. So big time coaching there. He also, this one's kind of a joke. This one will, if Josh Hart happens to listen to Locked On Knicks, he'll enjoy this, but he played Josh Hart like a zillion minutes to end the season and somehow unlocked his 3-point shot against Philly, which was huge for the Knicks. I think Josh Hart, if given the chance, would not have played those zillion minutes based off his post-game interviews or whatever, but still, I think he's pretty good about, at this point, I've now fully gone out on the Tibbs plays guys too many minutes thing. I think that he's good at identifying which players are able to play more minutes and letting them do so if it means that the team could win the game. And he did do a good job with like the Isaiah Hartenstein minutes restriction and all that, and making sure that he wasn't playing too many minutes. So I do think he's shown some growth in that area. And then, of course, I mean, he has coached Jalen Brunson, and so much goes to Jalen. Again, there's a fine line with development between the work that the player's putting in and the coach empowering them in just the right way. But he has coached Jalen Brunson as he's become a top 5 caliber NBA player. So I think Jalen Brunson has put in tons of work himself, but Tibbs empowered him to, become this offensive hub that he is with the Knicks, and, tailored an offense to him to maximize his skill set. So I think he deserves some credit for that as well. Then the Knicks offensive and defensive per 100 possession marks since 2020 to 21. I won't belabor this point too much, but I think they've been really good. 3rd in defense, 26th in offense in 20 to 21, 11th in defense, 22nd in offense in 21-22, then 22-23, 19th in defense per 100 possessions, but 11th in offense. And then this past season, clearly their best effort yet in the 50-win season, 10th in defense per 100 possessions, 7th in offense per 100 possessions for the Knicks this past season. So top 10 in both categories. So Tibbs is kind of in his time. He started setting a culture. He's since, I think, legitimately reinvented himself as a coach and maybe as a person in some ways. He seems like he has a lot more fun than he ever used to as a coach now. But reinventing himself as a coach, I think he's done so much with how he approaches the game. Like defensively, I think he's mostly stuck to his guns and made things work with different personnel and all that. So, he's kind of played the drop coverage and tried to protect the rim at all costs. And that's sort of been his his hallmark of his defense so far with the Knicks, which I think is fine. As long as you have the personnel to make that work. Having guys stick to their man, I think is fine, more so than switching everything, especially considering he loves having a traditional center out there at the 5, to gobble up those rebounds. He legitimately turned he made offensive rebounding in style again. He turned it into a viable, strategy on offense again after teams had pretty much abandoned it, with the Golden State Warriors era, with their version of like the pace and space and, just getting up tons of threes. There was a lot of teams just kind of opting to take the 3 and then get back on defense and, not so much go for those offensive rebounds. And Tibbs worked it in where, he was like, well, I can have offensive rebounding dominant centers. And, that's more points that we're leaving on the table potentially. And that's why you saw like the Knicks in 22 to 23, especially, they ended up 11th in offense. And they were not a great shooting team that year. And it was because Tibbs identified like, well, we're going to struggle a little bit shooting the ball. We should go for every offensive rebound. We can have some guys get back on defense, or be ready to, if it looks like, the rebound's not going to go our way, but let's utilize a guy like Mitchell Robinson and get as many offensive rebounds as we can. And we see now that formula make it really easy to plug and play guys into the center position with the Knicks, like Precious Achiuwa, for example, who struggled for a little bit, but once he realized what his role would be, was able to just dominate on the offensive glass and in some of his appearances and, really make himself look like a player worth keeping on this team, which hopefully they do soon. If not, sign and trade him or whatever they're going to do to get the next great center prospect on this team. But, Tibbs has done a really good job with that. And, also the big decision in 22-23 to go from the 10-man rotation to the 9-man rotation to make big seismic changes to the starting lineup, by around the 20 game mark or so, which he did in 22-23 by moving Quentin Grimes into the starting lineup and moving Evan Fournier out. And then obviously this past season by moving Grimes out of the starting lineup and moving Dante DiVincenzo in, he made some pretty big moves that ultimately affected the Knicks for the better towards the end of the season. So he's done a lot. He's done a lot to make this team better. He's done a lot to make himself better.
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for baseball, basketball, baseball. I said baseball. There's more baseball, football, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app, and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
Manager Alex Cora is officially now here to stay.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast.
Alex Cora is now here to stay. He has been extended. He agreed with the Red Sox on a 3-year contract extension that covers the 2025 through 2027 seasons. He will make more than $7 million per season. His original contract was set to run at the end of this season. So I was curious if he was going to end up leaving. I thought, after this season with the end of his contract being here, that he walked away because the Red Sox haven't done a lot to invest in the team over the last few years, and the talent that they've provided him with hasn't been as good as it could have been. So I thought for sure there was a chance he was just tired of this organization and wanted to go somewhere where the front office was investing more in the team on the field. But he said he was happy with being in Boston, and he has definitely deserved tons of flowers for the way that this team is performing this year and how he's managing them, because he certainly is allowing them to exceed expectations by a lot. They're one of the most surprising teams in baseball this year after finishing in last place in the AL East last year with identical 78 and 84 records in the past 2 seasons. Another season 2 years ago in which they finished in last. And they did have a relatively quiet offseason, all things considered. So Alex Cora knew he had to lean into the development of his young core as being the key to the team's success this season. And that certainly has played out with first-time All-Stars Jarren Duran and Tanner Houck both having breakout seasons. Cedar Rafaela, Wilyer Abreu, and David Hamilton also becoming key contributors and adding more athleticism to the club this season. So there's definitely been a few players that have stood out that are younger, that are blossoming into the players they could really be, that are contributing a lot to this team right now. And Alex Cora is a lot to thank for that. The Red Sox have a very good shot still to make the playoffs. They are very much in the wild card race on the Royals' tails, and they are just going to need to continue to win series and get back on track to where they were prior to the All-Star break, because that version of the Red Sox that we saw for the last month and a half or so leading into the break was the best version of Red Sox baseball we've seen all season long. And if they could get back to that and hone in on that while also getting some help, hopefully at the trade deadline, they have a really good chance to be a contending team this year. And I have had conversations on this show about what it would take to get Alex Cora to stay. And he is now here committed to managing in Boston. And I'm not sure that every Red Sox fan realizes how lucky we actually are to have Alex Cora. I mean, if you look at the 2021 season and the Red Sox exceeding expectations then and going to the ALCS that year that people didn't expect. I mean, there have been things during his tenure that they have done very well when they weren't supposed to be playing well. And he's mastered to a T how to utilize the speed on the Red Sox roster this year. And he also has figured out which bullpen arms to use when. For example, Chase Anderson, who came into the blowout game on Wednesday against the Rockies, he has kind of established himself in a role for this Red Sox team to where even though he is not good, he throws in the games that are blowouts and are already a wash. And a lot of times, Alex Cora just lets him finish the game. He did not do that on Wednesday. But a lot of times, he'll just come in the 6th or 7th inning if the game is basically over and the Red Sox are trailing by a lot or even winning by a lot, when there's breathing room for him to give up some runs and it won't matter anyway. And it saves the bullpen a lot of work because other guys in the pen are able to rest for longer periods of time if they're not going to be throwing in those games. So as bad as Chase Anderson has been this year, and as much as it would be easy to say we need to get rid of him, it actually might not make sense to get rid of him because he is that guy you can use in those games that are a wash earlier on. So that way, then you don't have to use other bullpen arms. And Alex Cora is an absolute genius for finding him that role on this team and utilizing him as that guy when they're pretty much out of a game or they're winning by a ton of runs and it would take a ridiculous miracle for them to lose a game. And being in that role is obviously probably not fun for him, knowing he's the go-to guy when the Red Sox don't have a chance to win the game. But hey, he has a role on this team and he's getting pitching time on the major league roster. So can't really complain at the end of the day about how he's being utilized. And also, for one, let's just talk about the brawl that happened on Wednesday. I mean, absolutely crazy. Reese McGuire flied out, and then Rockies starting pitcher Quantrill said something to him that was pretty triggering to him, and then he got in his face, and then the benches cleared. It was absolutely crazy, and just lots that happened in that game. But Alex Cora kept his cool and tried to keep his players composed, and that's something I really like about him. He looks out for these guys. He takes care of them like family, and he has a relationship with them to where he can goof around with them to make it a more fun clubhouse vibe, but he can also be serious when he needs to be. And that was the biggest reason to me why Alex Cora is still here and why the Red Sox wanted to hang on to him as the manager, is because he truly is a player's coach, and managing can make all the difference, especially when it comes to postseason play. When you are a manager for a playoff team, that could make the difference between you and another team when it comes to your vibes during the postseason and your chances of winning. So I'm very proud that Alex Cora is our manager. I feel really lucky to have him. And there was some rumblings about whether he was going to stay after this season. And now we have our answer. We don't need to sweat about it and worry about the Red Sox having to make moves to improve the team in the offseason, as well as finding a new manager. And it was interesting because in his latest interview, when he was asked about his contract situation, he didn't really give an answer. He just said, hopefully we can talk about it after the World Series. So he didn't really give an answer either way as to whether he was leaning in the direction of staying or he was close on anything with the Red Sox. So it was definitely really interesting the way this unfolded, but he is now here. We have him for another few years, and that should make Red Sox fans very happy because he is a very good manager overall. And we as Red Sox fans are lucky to have him.
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, the Olympics, WNBA should be back soon. There's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. The Jacksonville Jaguars, despite their offseason moves, are right on the playoff bubble. FanDuel has the Jags plus 118 to make the playoffs, as well as the second best odds to win the AFC South at plus 270. The Houston Texans are division favorites, plus 105. If you're a Texans fan, like our editor, Lance Daw, you may look at Houston's over-under. Their win total set at 9.5. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the moves that make the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
The Yankees got swept by the Mets for the season.
You are Locked On Yankees, your daily New York Yankees podcast.
It's a postmortem, really, is what this whole episode is. I'm not even going to do a rundown because we're commiserating with you. We're commiserating with each other. And yeah, we're just going to see where this goes.
No, I disagree. I think they're right there. Like, they played really well tonight. You know what? They may have not scored a lot of runs, but the at-bats were solid. They saw a lot of good pitches. Minaya was terrific. He knew how to speed them up and slow them down, which was tough for the Yankees. But they had really good at-bats, saw really good pitches. They're right there.
I had to laugh earlier because Phil Hughes tweeted at 9:47 p.m., "The Yankees are close. I can feel it." Mm-hmm. And I replied, "It's right in front of them, Phil. It's right in front of them."
What's funny is if you hear what Buster Olney said at the end of the god-awful broadcast on ESPN, which is, I could do it 45 minutes on the broadcast. If you hear what he said, he suggested the Yankees' way of fixing this and getting themselves out of this problem is to make an overhaul trade deadline move and trade for like 7 players like they did in 2000. And it worked in 2000, sure. The idea of doing that, where you would have to now empty your entire farm system and essentially start over from scratch as a franchise, I don't think that's happening either. They are at a point now. I don't care how easy the schedule appears to be in August, because you've seen everybody talk about that. Heck, we did a show on it, how their schedule is so favorable in August, and there's really an opportunity to turn things around here. Stacey, all of those teams that are really bad, that see the Yankees coming into town, are all saying what we're saying. Oh, good. There's 3 wins for us.
Right.
That's what they're saying. And we know this Yankee team is better. We know they are. But I don't want to come on every single show because it feels like over the last month we've called for Aaron Boone's job, right? Our second highest video ever viewed yesterday. We really thank you guys. We're almost at 10,000 views in less than 24 hours. What more do you guys want us to say as fans of the show? Because we appreciate you guys. We see you guys listening. And after the performance like this, I know, I think most Yankee fans are aware the Yankee-Met rivalry is a completely overblown thing by people who really don't watch baseball. But besides that, you did just get swept by your inner city rivals, a team that started the year off 0-5. People were laughing at the New York Mets, calling this a restart year for the New York Mets. They're a heck of a lot better than you, and they proved that tonight. They scored 12 runs on the Yankees and definitely could have scored more because they were toying with them towards the end of this game. There is no motivation on this team. There is no care on this team. I had to hear in the last inning from the broadcast about how, isn't it so cool how Garrett Cole and Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton are at the top step of the dugout? They really care. I don't care how much they care. Win ball games. Okay? Right. Get base hits. I want to hear Aaron Judge call the team out. I know Aaron Judge has had this unbelievable, historic MVP season, and I'm really happy about that. Call somebody out. Not a single player on this team has been called out this year. Not a single player. Nobody has been referred to about how bad they've played this year. You let Gleyber Torres off, who actually had a pretty good game. 2 extra base hits, really had a nice game. What did that do? Everything past the 3-hitter tonight was completely irrelevant. We saw DJ LeMahieu come in with the bases loaded and just a ground ball into ground ball into ground ball. That's every at-bat for DJ LeMahieu today. He hits a home run the other day, and we acted like a kindergartner just spelled the word because for the first time. I can't you watch this team every single night, and God bless the fans who don't have to watch it every single night of our show. We have to because this is how we get employed. But it is an every single night thing, and I don't know how, as an owner of a franchise, you could watch yourself get blown out in essentially 2 straight games because they were non-competitive the night before. How you can get blown out in essentially 2 straight games, swept for the season series against the Mets, where the last series isn't that raw. It was about a month ago. And look, this you get the All-Star break. It gets a chance to restart your season, and you look worse than you did prior to the All-Star break after collapsing in the month of June. I don't know how an owner of a team can go forward and keep the same manager. They will, because we've seen them do it countless times now. I don't know how you go forward, or without making some move, some upgrade, something, because there is a countless amount of people that I know that don't watch baseball on a daily that know that something needs to be done for this team. I don't know what else there is to do with this team. I don't.
Well, you had mentioned how everything basically falls off after the 2 and 3 hitter. So here's some disturbing info for all of you. The Yankees' OPS from every spot in the batting order besides 2 and 3 since June 15th. That's the magical date when everything started falling apart. The day after they improved to 50 and 22, the number I'm constantly saying. Only the White Sox are worse. Only the White Sox are worse. Also, the Yankees are 6 and 15 in their last 21 home games. They can't even win games at home at this point. That is terrible because that used to be actually at the beginning of the season. They were pretty good at home and good on the road. And now they're just bad everywhere. We're about a month everywhere.
We're about a month and a half since that day. They have 10 more wins.
Well, it's a month and all right.
10 days, whatever.
A month and 10 days. But yeah, it's I don't think I've ever seen
10 wins
anything like
then.
this.
I
don't even think we saw this in 2022 with how bad they were. This is unbelievable. This is absolute with that roster. The roster is not that terrible. There are so many guys who are not hitting that should be hitting, and only 2 guys who are hitting. Oh, also, can I just point this out before I forget, because you had mentioned the ESPN broadcast. Soto hits the ball, and Ravitch says that it was hit fairly deep. The ball went 443 feet into Monument Park. Fairly deep. That's fairly deep to you? Is the glue from his hair hat affecting his brain? I don't understand. Like, I don't get
that whole broadcast. And again, I could do a 40-minute show on how atrocious that broadcast is. It's so sad that we went from, I mean, at least when I was a child, from John Miller and Joe Morgan and the great broadcast where they made a spring training game feel like a big game, to what we have now on television. It is so hard to watch this broadcast. It is so they spent 4 innings re-showing a highlight of Francisco Lindor high-fiving his daughter. And you're like, look at how good he's a family man. The Yankees could all not be family men. If they won games, I wouldn't care. I don't care how good I'm sorry. Like, it's nice. It's a nice story. Great. I really genuinely don't care if Francisco Lindor is a good father or not. It means nothing to me. As a fan of the sport, as a baseball fan, if I'm a Mets fan, I don't care. And they obsessed over him high-fiving his daughter like we've never seen a father get along with a daughter before. That was insane to me. Then you got to hear later on how, and I'm not a Francisco Lindor hater, but if Francisco Lindor played like this in the month of April, he'd be the leading candidate for MVP in the National League. Dude, just slow down. I know you want to act like the players that you're covering at the moment are playing really well, and Lindor has been really good in the last 2 months. But you're forgetting that Shohei Ohtani's got like almost 40 home runs already? I mean,
Right.
give me a break, dude. I mean, like, I get it. You want to make everything seem like a big game, but we are just, I mean, this broadcast is so bad, and it was better when Aaron Boone was in the broadcast. Heck, I would give him a job on that broadcast immediately tomorrow if he wanted to get his butt out of New York. I don't know how, as an owner of a team, and I've seen the comments in here, someone wrote earlier that it was hysterical because Hal isn't watching this game. He's counting his money on his couch, which may be true. I'd like to know, I can't imagine the owner of the Yankees is not focusing on what's going on right now. Is not like seeing this. I gotta think when they play the Mets, when they play the Red Sox, when they play these bigger, more elevated national TV games, he's focusing on it. And you can't lose these 2 games in a row to the Mets and lose them as badly as you've lost them and not think to do something. Not think something needs to be done. There is no press conference that's been held. There's no one getting fired. I mean, and I'm not saying someone's head needs to be on a stick every single time they lose 5 games in a row, but Stacey, is anybody else seeing what we're seeing? Is anybody else seeing what we're seeing?
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm going to say this. Could you imagine if this happened while George was alive? The sweep from the Mets, because he used to get pissed off when they lost exhibition games to the Mets. Legit pissed off, like crazed, because, people always think of the old man Steinbrenner after he got suspended and towards the end of his life. He was legitimately insane for the first 20 years of his ownership. And he would freak out anytime that the Yankees lost the Mayor's Trophy in the exhibition game against the Mets. Could you imagine him sitting through this? No one would be here for the
Billy
game
Martin.
on Friday.
Billy Martin would be on his 3rd or 4th stint of the year by now.
Like, everyone would be gone. Every single person would be gone.
Everyone should be gone. I don't agree with the way George handled the team. And I think it shows, as history shows, George handled the team terribly in the 80s. He handled it terribly in the late 70s, terrible in the 90s. Even though they won 2 World Series in the late 70s, it was handled terribly. And even into the 90s, I don't give him a lot of credit for those teams because this is a guy that wanted to trade away Mariano Rivera at a time. So I'm not going to sit here and give him praise for winning those championships when they were built because he wasn't there and suspended. But Stacey, there's something to be said about having a little bit of fire. You can't go from 1,000 miles per hour to 15, which is what this current ownership is. I know you don't want to shake things up midseason. I know that's not the Yankees' mantra technically, but are you going to miss the playoffs now for a second straight year and win 80 games for a second straight year and go forward with, they saw good pitches. They're right there. They're not right there. They lost 12-2 to a team that can't hit. I mean, can you remember that? The Mets aren't a good offensive team. They're not.
Who usually can't hit, yeah.
And they hit 5 home runs tonight.
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for baseball, basketball, baseball. I said baseball. There's more baseball, football, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app, and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
They extend Andrew Nemhard. I'm stunned.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast.
Andrew Nemhard, 3-year contract extension with the Pacers. $59 million is the reported number. I believe that the actual number is $58.65 million. Not that it's super relevant, but either way, 3 years, about $59 million for Andrew Nemhard on a contract extension. If you heard me talk about this, I said, I don't think this is going to get done. And if I were Andrew Nembhard, an advisor for him, I would not tell him to sign an extension with the Pacers. This is a huge win for the Pacers, massive win, because the way this works functionally, I don't want to get too in the weeds because that's kind of boring, but he's already under contract for 2024-25 at $2 million. That does not change. That contract amount is still the same. So what's going on here is he had a team option next year for 25-26. That is declined. That's gone. And it's replaced by this 3-year extension. So he has this season plus the 3 more years added, and he is now under contract for 4 years at a total of $60.67 million. That's an unreal good contract for the Pacers. Like that's barely over the mid-level exception. And the bet here is really interesting, right? So again, I'm getting too into the weeds, but I am just amazed that the Pacers were able to get this deal done. No options on it either. That would have been a way that I thought this could get done, would be a player option. It is 3 years instead of 4, which makes sense for Nembhard to get back out there in a couple years. So the reason that this functionally mattered and worked out was next year, Andrew Nembhard could have, and likely would have if there was no extension, become a free agent. The Pacers would have declined their cheap team option for 2025-26 because they could have made him a restricted free agent, whereas if he played out that year, he would have become unrestricted in 2026. Unrestricted is scary. So instead of having him be unrestricted in 2026, they now add 2 years past 2026, which is the pro for the Pacers beyond the cheap cost. Andrew Nembhard, who has basically only made $8 million in his career, gets an extra $60 million. That's a win. But the restricted free agency part of this is where I think that there was room for negotiation. Why I never ruled it out, even though, again, it absolutely stunned me, is because next summer he would have been a restricted free agent, and restricted free agents don't always get the maximum value. Now, what was going to happen on today's podcast, I said this, you can listen to older shows this week. I said, today, Thursday, we're going to talk about extensions, and we were going to talk about Andrew Nembhard and what the new Pacers reality meant for his extension outlook. And something I was going to bring up and was doing some research into is who has cap space next summer, not right now, next summer, that could actually sign Andrew Nembhard to a big deal. Because sometimes people talk about this, like, oh, this guy could get a big offer, but there's no team out there that's actually going to do it. Doesn't make sense, right? That was kind of the thing with Pascal this summer, is that there wasn't really another team that made a ton of sense to give him a ton of money. Someone would have, but the cap space teams weren't able to really dent the Pacers except for maybe one. Next year with Andrew, the Spurs, where he would fit awesome, would have had, without doing anything, and they could easily make more, $23 million in space. The Wizards would have had $25 million in space, and the Nets would have had almost $50 million. Those are 3 teams that are young and building and don't necessarily have a good lead ball handler on their team, or wouldn't next year in the Spurs case because of Chris Paul, and could have used him. Instead, Andrew Nembhard's going to make $18 million next season, right? So I thought because of that, and because of the rising mid-level exception, that this would not happen in this way. But the Pacers did it. They pulled it off, and that is huge for them. I think this is an awesome contract, right? Think about other starting 2s that signed this summer. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope got 3 for $66 with a player option, right? That is more guaranteed money than Andrew Nembhard has over 4 years and has a player option, right? Malik Monk got 4 years with a player option. Andrew Nembhard has 4 years with no player option at less annual value average than KCP and just a smidge over Malik Monk. And that's the starting 2-guard market. And he's 24, and those guys are vets and older, right? It's an awesome contract for a starting guard. Just unbelievably good. And I think the fact that he hadn't made much, of course, he fits well here and likes it here, just had an awesome playoffs, and restricted free agency meant he would likely have stayed with the Pacers anyway, meant lock it in now. Because there is always the downside risk of this kind of stuff where you say, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to go through the year before restricted free agency and bet on myself. And let's pretend that any number of these things could have happened. Drew had a bad year. Drew got hurt badly. Ben Mathurin has an awesome year. Or Ben Shepherd or some other young guy that has to get paid at some point. Any of those things happen, and all of a sudden, Andrew Nembhard's either not playing as much or isn't worth as much to the Pacers, and then the number of teams willing to pay him goes down. So there's always downside risk, right? I had a person DM me this today, and I thought it was actually a good kind of way of phrasing it. They said, tough to turn down a 10 times raise for the hope that you get a 15 times raise in a year. Now, I think that the floor for next year is probably still like a 12-ish raise. That's too high. The floor next year is probably like an 8-ish raise, 8x raise. But still, that was a good way of phrasing it. So I think the downside risk and all those factors I already said made it all kind of come together, right? The risks are the players like Klay Thompson, Dennis Schroeder, Buddy Hield from the Pacers, right? Got offered an extension with the team last year and then ends up getting less with Golden State. Gary Trent just signed the minimum, right? Those are the risks. The guys that can extend for a good amount and say, no, I think I can get more. And then they don't, right? And so that does exist. That is out there. And so it all comes together because of unique contractual mechanics, because Andrew Nembhard is good and the Pacers get him for a long time. This is an A move to me, as close to A. I mean, maybe A plus, right? If it was 4 years with no options, I'd have given it an A plus. Like, this is an unbelievably good move to me for the Pacers. Nembhard now can have this done before the Olympics. I bet it gets announced before they play their first game. That's just a guess. I guess there's no reason why it would or wouldn't be. But and even the other thing is, for the Pacers, as they head into financial craziness, I just read this post from Lamar Murray, who covers the Clippers for The Athletic, about how many teams have, how many guys are on each team in the league from the last 5 years ago, right? It's fascinating. The Pacers' only two guys are Miles Turner and TJ McConnell. No team has more than four, right? Like, rosters change fast in the NBA. Well, guess what? The whole life of this Andrew Nembhard contract is extremely tradable, right? Great value for the Pacers. Very comparable to starting guards, and he's much younger than the guys who get them. And he attaches himself to the team through this core range. Let's talk about this. So now Andrew Nembhard's under contract through 2027-28. So is Tyrese Haliburton, Pascal Siakam, Obi Toppin. Excuse me, I went 4 years out. Andrew Nembhard is under contract to 27-28. For the next 3 seasons, so through 26-27, the Pacers have under contract Tyrese Haliburton, Pascal Siakam, Obi Toppin, Aaron Nesmith, Jarris Walker, Ben Shepherd, Andrew Nembhard, and Johnny Furphy. All those guys are young except for Siakam, right? Like, that's a core. That's a building thing.